welcome to everyone who's joined us. And as Maureen said earlier in the chat, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. My name is John Clemay. I'm the Director of Strategy and Growth at Institute for the Future. And I'll let Rod introduce himself here in a moment, but just to sort of set the table, do some housekeeping before we get into it. Thank you for joining this webinar of the IFTF Vantage platform. We're going to be here for approximately 30 minutes. We'll do a presentation, walk you through the platform, what we do at the Institute, and so forth. There will be a question and answer period towards the end of our 30 minutes. And if there are more, if they keep coming, we'll of course go over time to answer all of your questions, but we will give you a heads up if it is at that 30-minute mark. So you can go on to do whatever else you have to do. We will also be sending a follow-up email that will contain a video of this webinar and several links that we will probably reference during the webinar. So you'll get everything, you'll get the presentation, several links, and the video, as I said, perhaps later today or worst case tomorrow at some point. So that's the housekeeping portion. So I will go ahead and kick it off by telling you a little bit about Institute for the Future. We are a 53-year-old nonprofit futures thinking organization based in Palo Alto, California. So right in the heart of Silicon Valley. I'm coming at you from San Francisco, so just an hour north from our headquarters. But back in the late 60s, we had a handful of people that spun out from the Rand Corporation and wanted to do more systematic futures thinking about certain areas, certain topics that they found interesting. We are a nonprofit, as I said earlier, so the goal and the mission and really what's at the heart of what we do is to help organizations to think systematically about their long future. We combat short-termism. That's what we do. We really work with these organizations to stop putting out fires. That is what short-termism is. You're putting out a fire today, and then there's a different fire to put out in a week from now. So that's what we do. I will go ahead and kick it over to Rod to tell you a little bit more about specifically the Vantage platform.
Great. Can you hear me? I think I was having some connection issues. Great. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Rod Falcon. I'm a research director here at IFTF. Been here for about 25 years, worked on just about every kind of project. I'm here just to give you a quick overview of futures thinking and share with you more about the IFTF Vantage partnership. And I'm just going to kick it off by sharing with you a little bit more about how we think about strategic foresight. So for us, we think of strategic foresight as a set of tools. And maybe some of you have been exposed to some of our tools, but they're also processes and mindsets, all focused on anticipating the future and making decisions under conditions of uncertainty. This is really important. I think the value of strategic foresight is to really consider a wide range of possibilities and to make better decisions in the present. But strategic foresight is also about imagination. Imagination, being able to tap your imagination and being able to see transformative possibilities where none existed before. This fits right into the innovation process, but also thinking through scenarios of different possibilities and really thinking about the world you want to create and manifest.
Rod, real quickly,
yes.
I'm not seeing the slides advance. Sorry to break in there.
Oh, okay. Are they now?
No.
No. Okay.
That's okay. Would you like, I could take over and share mine? Sure.
Why don't you do that?
Sorry, folks, a little technical glitch here. Luckily, it happened at the beginning. All right, let me do that. Here we go. Can you see me advancing, Rod?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Go to the next slide.
There we go. All right. Thank you.
So the future is, strategic foresight is also useful in the context of organizations because it helps us challenge assumptions that the current way of doing things will continue working. In our toolkits, we have what we call the two-curve framework. And it's a very simple concept that helps you describe a shift from an old way of doing things to a new way of doing things. And that's a really great tool for challenging how current approaches, whether or not they'll continue to work. But it also helps bring people together to create a shared long-term perspective and align present-day decisions on that perspective. And I think it's also about anticipating long-term threats and opportunities, which can get folded into strategies, new product development, and again, decisions about talent, decisions about the marketplace. And ultimately, strategic foresight is about preparation, preparing people and organizations for future possibilities. Next slide. One of the really great things about futures thinking is that you can get started right away. And I always like to invoke the words of William Gibson, who said, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." This is a very clear, this is a reminder that we can look for the future in the present. And so we work a lot with signals, early indicators of changes, early indicators of shifts. It can be a story, a new data point, a new startup, and really the collection of signals is the evidence that we work with. They're the building blocks of forecast. But everyone can get started as long as you adopt this mindset that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed, and that you can look for the future in the present. Next slide. At the Institute, we also say that you can think systematically about the future. And this is our framework, and one that you'll see explicitly organizing our reports, our conferences, our interactions. And it's very simple. You start with preparation. Here is where you're gathering signals, gathering evidence, framing future questions, asking your colleagues what are their assumptions about the future. For example, is technology bringing us closer or further apart? But really airing out these assumptions is a way to prepare before you enter a foresight project. The next step is really using that evidence to develop plausible, provocative visions of future possibilities. And forecasts can take different forms. They can be expressed simply as a shift, a really well thought out and extensive scenario. But we use these foresights or forecasts to work with others, let's say inside organizations or other experts, to identify insights. And these are often expressed as threats or opportunities that really compel people, individuals, or organizations to act in the present. And that's where we move on to action. Again, there's no point in anticipating the future unless you're going to do something about it today. So that's really about making decisions in the present. Next slide. Now, one way to sort of visualize this process is that you're using signals, you're using them to create forecasts, and really kind of the job of these frameworks and these tools is to help you define the widest range of possibilities. So at the widest range of this cone of uncertainty. So as you move further out in time, really your uncertainty increases. So we use strategic foresight to define the widest range of possibilities. As we move through the Foresight Inside Action process, we're able to identify more plausible forecasts, more plausible scenarios, more probable scenarios, and then ultimately, next slide, the process of setting up strategy is really defining or identifying those preferred futures and then working backwards to identify the steps that'll get you there. So that's the way that we think about strategic foresight, and all of our tools and forecasts come together to support these processes inside organizations or communities. Next slide. And ultimately, I really liked sharing this quote from a colleague of ours. It's better to be surprised by a simulation rather than blindsided by reality. Again, the reminder here is strategic foresight is about preparation. It's about being ready for disruption and not being blindsided. And we do that again by following that systematic process of preparation, foresight, insight, action, considering the widest range of possibilities. So if any of those come true, you would have at least thought about it and maybe even considered actions or ways to respond. This is all about preparation. And in our work, we see that organizations actually, through strategic foresight tools and practices, actually cultivate different orders of future readiness. And one way to think about this, yes, all organizations are working across multiple time horizons, from short, medium, and long. So out on horizon 3, it's sort of the most visionary, the most speculative futures, and those are critically important. But you also need to bring them back to the short term and how are they affecting operations or the organization's current market footprint. And then ultimately, in the medium term, you also are identifying innovation opportunities that are aligned with the long-term vision and can pull your short-term or market footprint forward. So future-ready organizations are kind of playing this temporal gymnastics of thinking through the long-term, jumping back to the present, identifying investments in the medium term. And so that's critically important. But organizations are also building future readiness at different scales. So at operations or the market, their market footprint, they're applying strategic foresight, trying to really extend the value of their market portfolio of products, services, and experiences. At the organization level, they're applying strategic foresight at corporate foresight in strategic planning, thinking about questions about the future of talent and issues like that. At the system level, organizations are thinking really outside of themselves, outside of their industry. They're thinking about the larger urgent futures like the climate crisis, inequality, big issues that maybe it may not be immediately clear why they should care about those issues, but as they consider their evolution over the long term, they'll create really an operational environment of potentially new disruptions. So that's how we think about organizations cultivating different orders of future readiness. Next slide.
Thanks, Rod. I always like your phrase temporal gymnastics. It's always a favorite of mine. Okay, so what we're looking at here with this slide is simply pointing out the importance of strategic foresight on an organization's performance. And what we're showing some data and statistics from is a study conducted by Renee Rohrbach, a professor at Aarhus, did a study on 81 organizations. They're all for-profit companies in Germany. And all of these 81 spanned the spectrum from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies. So it didn't focus on any one area, sector, or industry. But within the study, he developed a model for assessing future performance, future preparedness of a firm, or how actively engaged they are in this systematic futures thinking and experimenting, which we keep referring to, this systematic approach to long-term thinking, which is the key here to a future-ready organization. So ultimately, what they did was matched the future preparedness data from 2008 with performance in 2015. So over that 7-year period of time. And what they found was that future prepared firms, I'm highlighting this stat, they outperformed the average by a 33% profitability. So in business sense, they were more profitable. And they also saw a 200% more growth than the average firm that was studied within this organizational study. So we'll send the link to you so you can take a look at this as well. I'm sure a lot of you work for organizations or are part of organizations that are wanting to build foresight capacity. So this is one of many examples of how and why that's important and critical. We'll show you a few examples of current Vantage partners in a moment, but what we did was want to give you at least a handful of examples of other organizations that are current Vantage partners and in fact do more things with us than just participate in Vantage. They do some training or private advisory work that we also do. But the bottom line is really we're just helping them to systematically look at the future from a long-term lens. How can they build foresight capacity into their organizations? And then how can they amplify that throughout the organization? So the first example of that is a global food company. And we're talking about human food, pet food, and many other products that are part or within the umbrella of this organization. But what they were looking to do was how to structure and build out their foresight capacity and frameworks so they can be more beneficial throughout the organization. Again, shoring up their team, their foresight team, and then amplifying that out throughout the much larger organization. The second example is a social network company here in the Bay Area. In fact, we're doing many projects with them presently, but this one in particular was where we were taking signals of change and using them to inform their current apps, their future apps, what features of these apps that they wanted to have for when they were to release these apps, thinking 3 or 5 years out. So knowing what is popular now, but also knowing what this audience might be looking for in the future. The third example was a top tier consulting company. And this is one that is historically more interested in profitability rather than sustainability. I think it would be a fair way to assess that, but they wanted to change. And what they did was, among other things, they used some research that Vantage put out last year around how to build a climate positive organization. And it really impacted their own internal strategy and helped them to build towards climate positivity themselves. And lastly, a global advertising and public relations firm. They wanted to use us in looking at how strategic foresight can inform their innovation team. So think new products, new services. So A, how to impact that, but also how they were engaging the outside world or their community or their partners, et cetera. So there's 4 examples of Vantage partners and how they work with us. Again, the bottom line is how are they using strategic foresight to impact their business and amplify it throughout their organization. Here is just a sampling of some Vantage partners. And we like to show this just so you know it's not any one industry, area, sector that we focus on. You're seeing people from all over the world, first of all, so many geographies represented, but also retail, CPG, higher education, and so forth. So just wanted to show that to get a smattering of some of our current partners. And one of the things that's nice about the Vantage platform is you will be a part of this community. We offer many community events that Rod will talk about in a moment, specifically our annual 10-year forecast. So you'll have the opportunity to meet with and speak with and work alongside many of these other Vantage partners.
Great. So yes, I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the IFTF Vantage platform or program. Essentially, this is the primary way that organizations partner with IFTF, and it's a community of future-ready organizations. And this is organized, so partners that join this program receive an annual map of the decade. This is a 10-year outlook on the operational environment for organizations. We also hold an annual 10-year forecast. It's really a big, huge summit or community event where we all come together, think through the foresight, and engage with each other peer-to-peer, thinking through foresight, insight, and action. As part of IFTF Vantage, we also have a platform called Future Factors, where the community collects signals on many different topics and they build thematic boards. I'm currently working on one on the future of wellness, and we're collecting, in a very distributed way, signals that we'll use to inform the forecasts and scenarios that we ultimately create for that project. But all of the partners have access. So it's a really interesting and shared kind of collection of signals. We also have a community hub that we call Vantage Point, where you can access all of our past research, tools, webinars, videos, scenarios, reports. Everything that we create is there for you. And then partners also get a foresight guide. Someone like me or one of my colleagues that will also serve as essentially a guide to help you connect with resources that we have, whether those are reports or someone in our network. Next slide. And so I just wanted to share with you a little bit more about our map of the decade. So a lot of what I presented up front, so a future-ready organization definitely and certainly needs to build capacity internally. They need to be able to adopt these tools, frameworks, and build the practice of strategic foresight. But the other piece is that they also need to build a point of view about the next 10 years. And so a point of view about how things are changing, how things are evolving. And we do that every year with our map of the decade. And every year we select a theme. And this year's theme is really the reevaluation of everything. This theme's really coming out of the pandemic disruption and how it's really getting us to question our assumptions about what's value, how we want to live in the world, how we shop, how we work, how we live. And ultimately, in this map of the decade, we'll be defining the major forces that are really behind this reevaluation. Next slide. So just to give you a little bit more sense of what we're looking at. So some of the themes are, of course, health, mental health, recovering from the pandemic. How do we rebuild and re-enter society from all the sort of health and emotional fallout? Work, lots of questions about the future of work itself. How meaningful is work? Will it be as central in people's lives moving forward? But also questions about how we build a more equitable enterprise. Technology and the fractured reality that technology is creating. So many options for people to build community, so many ways for people to get information or disinformation, and of course the rise of the metaverse. How does all of this affect the fragmentation of reality and the prospects of building a shared sense of reality? Food, it turns out, is lots of innovations around ways to respond to the climate crisis. So that's a big theme. We're looking specifically at American democracy and the challenges there that we're experiencing here and probably across the world. Demography, big questions about aging and gender and how those are intersecting and coming together. Resources, ultimately how we produce, store, and consume energy will be a big concern. And then we're also looking at place, the digitization of the physical world and how that transforms the distribution of our life, across the things that we do, whether that's learning, health, work, and how those get redistributed across place, including the digital realm. Next slide. So this is just a slide sharing you what IFTF Vantage Point looks like. It's a platform that you would have access to. And again, it contains everything that we generate, all of our past 10-year forecasts, PowerPoints, reports, and it's just a really rich resource. So if we get to work together, we would probably jump on this together. And as you raise questions about, have you ever done anything on retail? I can probably point you to, the report and the forecast that we did the last time around, but it's a really great resource. Next slide. Maybe you want to talk about future factors. John?
Sure, absolutely. Yes. And by the way, if you are interested in seeing more with regard to Vantage Point, which Rod just described, or future factors, happy to jump on a call with you to walk you through the platform and demonstrate it for you. So IFTF future factors. So this is, as Rod mentioned earlier, it is our emerging signal scanning platform. So there are roughly 6,000 signals that are currently housed within future factors. And they are being, it's sort of a crowdsourced database. So it's, you have IFTF staff, as well as all of our other Vantage partners, which I think is one of the really great aspects of it. It's not just Institute for the Future in a vacuum. It is folks from all of those company logos I showed earlier that are adding signals to this. So again, it's not industry specific, it's not geography specific, it's global. It's virtually every sector or industry that you could possibly want to be tracking. And all of these signals, once they are within this repository, you can search for them. There's a little search window here I'm circling. So you can type in AI or climate change or sustainability or COVID or whatever, and it will highlight just those 40 or 50 or 60 signals that are relevant to that search. We also have private boards that are available to our Vantage partners. So what you're seeing here is sort of the general or public board. This is everything, but company X can have its own private board because you may not want the world knowing that you're tracking a certain area or areas for your own internal work or scenario building and so forth. So we just know that scanning for signals is a full-time job for many people. We try to do a good chunk of that heavy lifting by putting these signals in this database. So at least gives you a place to start when you are setting out on a particular project.
Yeah.
And lastly, we'll talk quickly about our Foresight Essentials training portfolio. I touched on this very briefly at the beginning, but when we talk about systematically helping organizations to think long-term about their futures, we generally do that in three ways. One is through our Vantage program, which Rod has told you about today. Another is through our advisory or consulting projects. So that's when we focus on a future of X, or there's a specific item that you want to know more about, the future of interactive engagement, the future of commerce, and so forth. The third way is through our Foresight Essentials training portfolio, which you're seeing this diagram here. It's showcasing all of the different ways that you can train. And when I say train, you're training to become a Foresight practitioner. So we're going to teach you how to fish, so to speak, or really strengthen that Foresight muscle, because it really is a practice and it is systematic. You have to know how to do that. And we show you our tools and methodologies on how to do it systematically. It's just like with anything, with any athlete, they can't just show up to the event and perform. You have to train and lift weights and run every day in order to become that top performer or top achiever. So very briefly, we offer individual open enrollment courses over here. So Foresight Essentials is the flagship. We offer a Design Futures course and a scenario building course as well. And just to note, we also offer custom trainings for an organization. So if you don't want to take the open enrollment course, it can be just your team of 5 or 10 or 20, and we could customize the curriculum for your group to help you solve for X. So that's our training program. Again, happy to tell you more about that. We'll send information at the end. But with that, we want to start taking some questions. And I know we're right at 9:30, unfortunately. But so drop off if you have to. But I do want to get to a few questions that I see we have here in the chat. Let's see, we'll start with this most recent one, maybe the first part of it, Rod, you can take. Michael asks, what is your take on preparation for unprecedented situations due to accelerating climate change developments?
We just created a map. I think John talked about this. And it was our last map of the decade called Moving Towards Climate, really becoming a climate positive organization. The reality is that the ultimate act is, everyone needs to reduce their carbon emissions. And I think that's critically important, and a lot of emphasis is placed there, even though action is very uneven. There are a lot of, as we did this project, there are a lot of organizations that are still in basically denial. They don't really see climate as something that's going to immediately affect their business. And this is sort of, in futures work, we call this either they're putting their head in the sand, but there's also this real dilemma that is the tragedy of the horizon, which means that in many organizations, today's leaders aren't going to be here within 10 years. So to really get them to focus on the urgent futures that are really shaping the next decade is really a huge hurdle. So we developed this map, recognizing that there are organizations are at different stages, and really to be climate positive, you're really kind of leading your sector, your industry, you're really leading among your peers, and you're doing you're really moving towards a broader definition of climate action, and really kind of creating new pathways for organizations to take. So I think it's a really great question, and we're actually going to be holding a webinar next month on this very topic, and I would encourage you to come to that, where my colleagues who really developed this research will probably go much deeper. And we're going to be making that map, a portion of it, available. So it's a really great resource that you'll probably find useful.
Great. Couple of questions that are similar, just around how can you join Vantage? How can you become a partner for all these events and activities? In the follow-up, we will have information on how to do that, and I'm happy to talk with each of you individually on what that looks like. And there was a sort of along the same lines, questions around NGOs and nonprofits. Yes, we do have many that are partners, and yes, we do offer a discount for those. So again, I'll follow up with you specifically on that one. But Rod, one for you. Given the disruptions of the current and ongoing pandemic, how can we move from a now focus to a next focus?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think everybody is focused on what's next, right? For the longest time, when a lot of us and many organizations out there have set dates to quote unquote come back, and that's proven to be short-lived. I think we just need to change our language about this. And my colleague Vanessa, who's developing one of the forecasts for the current map of the decade, is really trying to take a deep look at the mental health impacts and the huge mental health burden that this is creating across society. And I think the way that we need to think about it is really around the concept of re-entry, and that recognizing that we're all going to do that in different ways and at different paces. It's very interesting to me that if you think about how, just in my own life, commuting to Palo Alto, driving, many of us have adapted our lives to be able to make those commutes, go to work, be there on time. And now many of us have adapted our lives to work at home, simultaneously working and cooking meals, taking care of children or adult parents. And, re-entering is going to require kind of extracting ourselves from the life now that we created and the practices and habits that we have now. So it definitely will be a process, and it's definitely a question that we're thinking a lot more of. We do have a resource if you want to read more about the pandemic and some scenarios that we put together that try to anticipate post-pandemic life. Maureen will put that in the chat, and you can look more there. Those are in the public domain.
Thanks, Rod. Here's an easy one, I think. Rod, what is your definition of a signal?
I think I missed that.
The question was, what is your definition of a signal?
Of a signal? The easiest definition, it's something that doesn't fit. It's something you observe and it just sparks your curiosity. You know, you're not sure, you're not sure that it's entirely new, but there's something different about it. So that's what I always think about the signal. It's giving me a preview about something that could expand, could scale. And so it's really kind of sparking my imagination. So that's how I think about signals, but they're not always obvious. I think once you're tracking signals in a particular area, so I track technology in and around the body, so what I call body area networks and wearables. So I track signals in food and healthcare and the future of work. So when I see things, because I'm already tracking in those areas, I kind of know how I'm mentally stacking signals and things together to build on forecast. I know when something is also kind of a repeat of a fundamental idea or something that I've already seen. And I think over time, as you build this mindset, because it's very easy to do, once you start thinking in this way, really, you can't really turn it off. I mean, everything that you're doing, every interaction, even interactions with the youngest kids in my family sometimes become a signal for me about something. And so really it's everywhere, but it's ultimately, and this is something that you learn in our Foresight toolkit, is that ultimately you're trying to aggregate signals together. You're thinking about multiple signals coming together to build new possibility. And that's how I think about it. I can give you an example of something that I didn't know at the time was a signal, but was really, when I think about it, it was probably a really profound signal. So once upon a time, a long time ago, I lived on the East Bay, and I had to commute into San Francisco. IFTF had an office in San Francisco. And under the freeway, and many of you have probably seen these really casual carpools. There were lines of people lining up, jumping in strangers' cars to get to San Francisco. And I did that for years and years and years. And I just thought about it as really convenient getting to work. I didn't have to pay fare or drive or parking, which is very expensive in San Francisco. But it was, as I fast forward the years from that experience, the whole Bay Area, especially San Francisco, developed a pretty robust sharing economy of sharing cars, Airbnb, this kind of really interesting sharing economy. And for me, that casual carpool, which predated all of that, would have been a signal of this emergent sharing economy, because there was this, which you don't often see. You often see a technology and then the social change lags to adopt the kind of possibilities of the technology. But in this case, I think the culture and the behavior pre-existed all of these services. So it would have been a signal of, of bigger possibilities of how that could scale and how it could be delivered in new and different ways on platforms. And ultimately, that's what happened.
Yeah. Great. Thanks for that, Rod. Here, one more question is future foresight about examining the external environment rather than focusing on the institution internal environment?
It's both. So that's one of the things as we're thinking about what is a future ready organization, I think about it at least at 3 different scales. So applying strategic foresight, if you're a corporation at the scale of your market footprint, how does strategic foresight influence your product, service, and experience portfolio? How are you incorporating foresight to identify new innovation areas? But you're also applying strategic foresight at the level of the organization itself. This is, so the first level is like the traditional business unit. The second level is, that is corporate strategy. So you're thinking about the organization, its strategic plan, its own future, and you're asking questions about talent, how you're deploying technology, all kinds of questions there. And then, you can't be ready if you're only trying to understand the future of your market footprint or your organizational capacity. You also need to look outside of yourself. You can't be kind of egocentric in your strategic foresight. So a future ready organization is looking outside of itself. It's looking at the broader environment, so that you're not blindsided. So you are looking at, fractured realities, the impacts on democracy. You're looking at these broad demographic changes of how increasingly people are living alone. You're looking at how people are challenging what is knowledge, what is authority, and all of these things provide that external point of view that you just must consider. And then just to build on the question about climate, the point I wanted to make earlier, but I forgot, is that you need to incorporate the climate crisis in all the forecasting that you're doing. So it is a pervasive, it just is a fundamental issue. So if you encounter a scenario that hasn't considered the climate crisis, it's really incomplete. So you really need to be able to consider those kinds of impacts and changes in the futures that you're building.
Thanks, Rod. One other question was, how do I make my company embrace and master foresight as a way of doing business? We often see that there's these, what we call lone wolves in these big organizations.
Yeah.
So Rod, what would you tell this person?
There's a lot to tell. I would ask Maureen to put the link to, we developed a playbook on this topic. So we interviewed people like you that were just getting started, that definitely have a lot of internal challenges to convince leadership that this is important. Like John said, we also found that a lot of people are doing futures work, but it's not officially part of their role or job description. Step one is to find these lone wolves, this latent capacity to think about the future and build a community internally. So in this playbook, we talk about that. We talk about some basic frameworks to use. We interviewed foresight practitioners in all kinds of organizations all over the world, and we use their stories. You can read about their stories, about similar challenges and the tactics they use to get leadership to pay attention to these futures. So, some people are working in organizations where the leadership absolutely embraces this. And then in other organizations, it's sort of an uphill, mostly because the leadership is not really engaged in generating the foresight. So in those cases, a good foresight practitioner needs to be really good at their leadership so reminding you, foresight, insight, action, the leadership may only want you to talk about what's the insight and what's the action, and really don't want to know how you got there. So they don't really want you to don't show me your homework or the long, your work on how you got there, but tell me the insights and tell me the action. And so that's one of the challenges of being a foresight practitioner. The other thing is that you'll read in this book, this playbook, that many foresight practitioners are also very strategic about finding the right time and the right opportunity to present possibilities for leadership to act on. So yeah, I think you'll find a lot there, and I'm happy to talk to you more about it if you want.
Great. Rod, I think we'll end it there. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Rod. Thank you, Maureen, Joanne, for all of the assistance you provided. As I said in the beginning, you will receive an email with all of the links that you see in the chat and things that we referenced. We also have a video of this. Please, we encourage you to tell your colleagues about it. Reach out to us if you do have questions about how to join, what it costs, how many people can be a part of it, and so forth. I'm the person to talk to about that, so I will be in that email. So look for that, and please look at our website, iftf.org. We have frequent Ask a Futurist, different webinars that are free, that are open to the public. We encourage you to attend those, be part of that. Subscribe to the IFTF newsletter, News from the Future. Easy ways for you to stay in touch and be aware of the things that we are up to here at IFTF. So thank you again, Rod. Thank you in particular.
Thank you. Thank you,
for leading
John.
us through this. Everybody have a great day. Bye-bye.